Hi kids! So here we are at Sallie's house. She lives in Eugene, Oregon, and she is a fantastic reader and writer and storyteller. So we're going to be visiting her. What do you think, Brooke? Are you excited? We're going to go in and see Sallie. What do you think, Brooke? Hi! What do you think? Are you excited? Can we show our friend Sallie's house? Let's go have a story. Here we go.
Hi everybody, I'm Sallie Vandagrift, and today I wanted to share with you one of my very favorite holiday traditions, sitting around the house and reading stories. This is one of my very favorites. It's called The Quilt Maker's Gift, and it's by Jeff Broombaugh and Gail DeMarkin. Let's get started. There was once a quilt maker who kept a house in a blue, misty mountain up high. Even the oldest great-great-grandfather could not recall a time when she was not up there sewing away day by day. Here and there, and whenever the sun warmed the earth, it was said that she made the prettiest quilts anyone had ever seen. The blues seemed to come from the deepest part of the ocean, and the whites from the northernmost snows, and the green and purple from the abundant wildflowers, the reds and oranges and pinks from the most wonderful sunsets. Some said that it was the magic in her fingers. Some whispered that her needles and cloth were gifts of the bewitched. And still others said the quilts really fell to the earth from the shoulders of passing angels. What do you think? Many people climbed her mountain, pockets bursting with gold, hoping to one day buy the wonderful quilts. But the woman would not sell them. "I give my quilts to those who are poor or homeless," she said to all who knocked on her door. "They are not for the rich." And there she is, working away. On the darkest and coldest nights, the woman would make her way down the mountain to the town below. There she would wander the cobblestone streets until she came upon someone sleeping outside in the chill. She would then take a newly finished quilt from her bag, wrap it around their shivering shoulders, tuck them in tight, and tiptoe away. Then, the very next morning, with a steaming cup of blackberry tea, she would begin a new quilt. There she is. Now at this time, there also lived a very powerful and greedy king who liked nothing better than to receive presents. The hundreds of thousands of beautiful gifts he got for Christmas and for his birthday were never enough. So a law was passed that the king would celebrate his birthday twice each year. When that still wasn't enough, he ordered his soldiers to search the kingdom for those few people who had not yet given him a gift. Over the years, the king had come to own almost all the prettiest things in the world. Throughout the castle, from top to bottom, in drawers and on shelves, in boxes and trunks and closets and sacks, all the king's countless things were stashed. And there he is with all of his gifts. My goodness, how did he have room for them all? Oh, things that shimmered and glittered and glowed, things whimsical and practical, things mysterious and magical. So many, many things that the king kept a list of all the things he owned. Look at that. His castle is packed full of things. And yet, with all these marvelous treasures to enjoy, the king never smiled. He was not happy at all. Somewhere there must be one beautiful thing that will finally make me happy, he often was heard saying, and I will have it. One day, a soldier rushed into the palace with news about a magical quilt maker who lived in the mountains. The king stamped his foot. "And how is it that this person has never given me one of her quilts as a gift?" he demanded. "She only makes them for the poor, your majesty," the soldier replied, "and she would not sell them for any amount of money." "We'll see about that," the king roared. "Bring me a horse and 1,000 soldiers." Oh my. But when they arrived at her house, the quilt maker merely laughed. "My quilts are for the poor and needy. I can easily see that you are neither." "I want one of those quilts," the king demanded. "It might be the one thing that will finally make me happy." And there he goes to the quilt maker's house with his thousands of soldiers marching up the mountain. The woman thought for a moment. "Make presents for everything you own," she said, "and then I'll make a quilt for you. With each gift that you give, I'll sew another piece. Then, last of all your things are gone, your quilt will be finished." "Give away all my wonderful treasures," cried the king. "I don't give things away. I take them." And with that, he ordered the soldiers to seize the beautiful star quilt from the quilt maker. Oh my. But when they rushed upon her, she tossed the quilt out the window, and a great gust of wind carried it up and away. And there's the quilt gliding on the breeze. Oh, the king was now very angry. He marched the woman down through the town and up another mountain where he had his royal iron makers shape a thick bracelet of iron. Then they chained her to a rock in a cave of a sleeping bear. Oh gosh. Once more the king asked her for a quilt, and once more she refused. "Very well then," the king replied. "I'll leave you here, and when the bear awakens, I'm sure he'll make a very fine breakfast of you." Oh my goodness, there's the bear sleeping in his cave. He looks pretty scary. Oh gosh, later, when the bear's eyes opened and he saw the woman in the cave, he stood on his mighty hind legs and gave a roar that rattled her bones. She looked up at him and sadly shook her head. "Oh, it's no wonder you're so grouchy," the quilt maker said. "You've nothing but rocks on which to rest your head at night. Bring me an armful of pine needles, and with my shawl I will make you a great pillow." And that is what she did. No one had ever been so kind to the bear before, so he broke the iron bracelet and asked her to spend the night. And there he is, trying to scare her at first, and then resting on his lovely pillow. Now, although the king was very good at being greedy, he was very bad at being mean. All that night, he couldn't sleep for thinking about the poor woman in the cave. "Oh no, oh my, what have I done?" he wailed. So he woke up his soldiers, and they all marched in their pajamas up to the cave to save her. But when he arrived, the king found that the quilt maker and the bear were having a breakfast of berries and honey. And there they are, they're having a great time eating berries and honey. There are all the soldiers marching in their pajamas. Oh, now the king completely forgot about feeling sorry, and he became angry all over again. he ordered the royal island makers to build an island barely big enough for the woman to stand on her tiptoes. Oh. Once again, the king asked her for a quilt, and once again, she said no. "Very well," the king replied. "Tonight, when you are too tired to stand and lie down to sleep, you'll drown." And the king left her alone on the tiny island. Shortly after he left, the quilt maker saw a sparrow flying across the great lake. A cold, fierce wind was blowing, and it did not look like the poor bird would make it to shore. The quilt maker called to him, and he stopped to rest for a while on her shoulder. The poor, tired sparrow was shivering, so the woman quickly made him a coat from scraps of her purpley vest. When he was warmed and the wind had stopped, the bird flew off. But he was very grateful to the quilt maker for what she had done. Soon the sky darkened as the air filled with a huge cloud of sparrows. Thousands of wings beating together. They swooped down and lifted the woman in their little beaks, and they carried her safely to shore. There they go, carrying her into the sky. Again, that night, the king could not sleep thinking about the woman alone on the island. Oh my, what have I done?" he moaned. So he woke up his sleepy soldiers again, and they marched in their pajamas down to the lake to set the woman free. But when they arrived, she was sitting on a tree limb sewing tiny purple coats for all the little sparrows. "I give up," the king shouted. "What must I do for you to give you a quilt? To get your quilt?" And there she is up in the tree with all the little sparrows in their purple coats. "As I said," the woman answered, "give away all the things you own, and I'll sew a quilt for you. And with each gift that you give, I'll add another piece to your quilt." "I can't do that," cried the king. "I love all my wonderful, beautiful things." "But if they don't make you happy," the woman replied, "what good are they?" "That's true," the king sighed, and he thought about that and what she had said for a long, long time. So long that weeks went by. "Oh, all right," he finally muttered. "If I must give away my treasures, then I must." There he is, sitting in the tree, talking to her, and then it takes him all week long to think it over. The king went to his castle and searched from top to bottom for something he could bear to give away. Frowning, he finally came out with a single marble. One marble. But the boy who received it smiled so brightly in return that the king went back for more things. Eventually, he brought out a pile of velvet coats and went about town giving them to people dressed only in rags. All were so pleased that they marched up and down the street in a grand parade. Still, the king did not smile. There they are, marching in their velvet coats. But the king still wasn't happy. Next, the king fetched 100 waltzing blue Siamese cats. Have you ever heard of such a thing? And a dozen fish that were clear as glass. There's those blue Siamese cats. Then the king ordered his merry-go-round with real horses to be brought out, and the children cried with delight and cartwheeled all around them. And just the smallest of smiles began to show, just the tiniest, on the king's face. The king looked about him and saw dancing and merrymaking and all the happiness his gifts had brought. A child took hold of his hand and pulled him into the dance. Now the king really smiled and even laughed out loud. "How can this be?" he cried. "How can I feel so happy about giving my things away? Bring everything out. Bring it all out at once." Meanwhile, the quilt maker kept her word and started to make a very special quilt for the king. With each gift that he gave, she added another piece to his quilt. Look at all the dancing and happiness that's going on in the kingdom. So the king kept on giving and giving. When at last there was not one left in town who had not received something, the king decided to go out into the world and find others who might be in need of his gifts. But before he left, the king promised the quilt maker that he would send a sparrow back to her each and every time he gave something away. Morning, noon, and night, the wagons rolled out of town, each piled high with the king's wonderful things. And for years and years, messenger sparrows flew to the quilt maker's windowsill as the king slowly emptied his wagons, trading his treasures for smiles around the world. There are all of his wagons loaded with treasures. Oh my goodness, all over the world treasures. On and on the quilt maker worked, and piece by piece the king's quilt grew more and more beautiful. Finally, one day, a weary sparrow flew into her window and perched on her needle. She knew then and there that it was the last messenger, so she put the final stitch in the quilt and started down the mountain in search of the king. There she is, making her last stitch. After a long search, she finally found him. The king's royal clothes were now in tatters, and his toes poked out of his shoes. Yet his eyes glittered with joy, and his laugh was wonderful and thunderous. The quilt maker unfolded the king's quilt from her bag. It was so beautiful that hummingbirds and butterflies fluttered about. Standing on tiptoe, she tenderly wrapped it around him. "What is this?" cried the king. "As I promised you long ago," the woman said, "when the day came that you yourself were poor, and only then I would give you this quilt." The king's great sunny laugh made green apples fall and the flowers turn his way. "But I'm not poor," he said. "I may look poor, but in truth, my heart is full to bursting, filled with the memories of all the happiness I've been given and received. I'm the richest man I know." "Nevertheless," the quilt maker said, "I made this quilt just for you." Look at how happy he looks. "Thank you," replied the king. "I'll take it, but only if you accept this gift from me. There is one last treasure I have left to give away, and all these years I've saved it for just you." And from his rickety, run-down wagon, the king brought out his throne. "It's really quite comfortable," the king said, "and just the thing for a long day of sewing." From that day on, the king often came to the quiltmaker's house in the clouds. By day, the quiltmaker sewed the beautiful quilts she would not sell, and at night, the king took them down to the town. There he searched out the poor and downhearted, never happier than when he was giving something away. The end. I just love that story, and I hope you did too. What's your favorite holiday story? Do you have a tradition that you especially like to do? I'd love to hear about it. I hope you have a very happy holiday. Thanks for coming over. Oh, did you like that story, Brookie? Did you like it? Oh, good dog.
I think she really enjoyed being here at your house today, Sally. Thanks again.
Thanks for coming. coming, Brookie.